All right, so where are we going first? Should we fix the NBA?
NBA, and let's fix the NBA.
Okay.
There's been this huge conversation about the NBA and the decline of interest. Obviously, they're just swimming in money, massive TV contract, but it would appear that casual fan interest just going down, and it's opened up this big old, what do you do about the NBA? Everybody has an idea. Everybody has a reason for why it's declined. And three-pointers have become a fixation. And I proposed broadly, why not hand checking above the three-point line? And immediately when I floated that, I thought to myself, Nate is going to have ideas because this is not fleshed out. It's not fleshed out as far as the how. It's not fleshed out as to, okay, what happens when it's like right on the three-point line? There are a lot of details here, and Nate will have some thoughts about whether this is a good idea. And from there, we can move on to whether you think anything is wrong, and if there is something wrong, what you would want to do about it. So let's go. Hand checking above the three-point line. Thran checking, which will never catch on as a term.
Yeah, I think it would just be too difficult to say, oh, well, he's now inside the three-point line. You better take your hands off him. And they called the foul. Then they challenged the foul. Did his toenail go over the three-point line? Well, he still had his hand on him. Now, I do think, I will yes and you in this, that I think offense in general probably gets too easy of a pass, and that there are some things that I propose to help to fix that at least a little bit. Although I think in the playoffs, it's actually not as bad. But overall, especially night to night, like the demands of defense are so hard. Like some nights the defense is just not going to have it. But I think that one, like you often rail against additional complexity and reviews and
simplicity,
just for
man.
Imagining the announcers trying to explain like, okay, that's not a foul. And it would be something that would come up, 5 times a game, 10 times a game. And so it would just be like, also for the defensive player to have to monitor, in addition to trying to stop my man, I have now stepped inside the three-point line. I better go like this. Like that, that is, I think that would be too difficult. I do think my bigger concern actually on that specific issue is the offensive player can do whatever they want to the defensive player now. Like they can just use their off arm as a battering ram. The rule is, as if you don't extend your elbow, you can basically do whatever you want. So you can use your off arm as a blocking sled, slam into whoever's in front of you, knock them backwards, and then just shoot it. So I think that was something that you didn't really see much of. Like it was noteworthy when Jordan pushed off on Brian Russell, because like everyone's like, yeah, that should have been a foul. And you just didn't see that play very often. Now on every drive, guys will pick the ball up with one hand, take their other hand off the ball, bash it into the defender, knock him backwards, and then put their hand back on the ball to shoot it now that they have the space. So that would be the biggest thing that I would change to make things a little bit harder for the offense. And I think we're pretty close to an optimal level of offense and defense right now. And so that would be the one change that I would make. It's kind of along the line of what you're talking about. But of course, we have to talk about the too many threes thing in a second, too. But that's one of my big reforms, because if you watch, now that I say this, next time all of y'all watch the game, you're going to see it on every single drive. The guy just takes his off arm off the ball and bashes in the defender. It's like, especially if you're not as big as the guy who has the ball, unless you're just like right in front of him and you can fall down and take a charge, you just have no chance. You're just going to get knocked backwards.
Sometimes there are things that are legal, but they're just spiritually wrong, or they just feel like they're against the platonic ideal of the game. I was reminded of, there are a few guards who pioneered, I don't know who the first one was, if it was Tony Parker, eventually became a Lou Williams thing that kind of race down the baseline and bump off the defender trailing you and shoot that fadeaway in search of free throws. And it was, okay, well, this is taking advantage of the rules as they are. And yet it just felt a little bit off platonically. And it's similar where Chris Paul was always big on when somebody's trailing you to just screech to a halt and get a foul that way. That didn't feel right.
Now, the league has tried to fix these things. Actually, I will give them credit that every year they have, these little tricks. Like it crested the Lou Williams play in the 2017 playoffs. Every single play was that. I remember even I talked to Steph because he he started doing it. I'm like, Steph is not the guy who's going to like try a bunch of crap to draw calls usually. And I was like, wow, it's like pretty noteworthy that you tried that. Like, how can you start doing that? He's like, well, have you seen all the other games this year?
Yeah.
But then they at least made that a non-shooting foul now. So it's not as bad. And the whole, like, they did a good job of taking away. Yeah, the rip through, that's not a shooting foul anymore. They did a good job of taking away the pump fake and then take a giant step forward and jump into the guy move. Now it has to be where you just have to shoot your normal shot when you pump fake. And if the guy hits you, then it's a foul. They have the one where you get the guy on your side. You're not allowed to like veer back into his path. You can stop and shoot. And Trae Young still does that. But like, you can't do he's running alongside me. Now I'm going to deviate and have him run into my back. That's an offensive foul. It's like little things like that I actually give them credit for doing a good job. Like, there is less bullshit in the game now, I would say, than there was 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, I think they have done well on certain ones. My favorite of the rip throughs was when Draymond.
Wait, what? What did you say?
Wait, that's the punchiness. I don't know what I just said.
What?
You're
the NBA? They did something well? You're allowed to say that?
I am fair. I'm a victim, Nate. A victim of calling balls and strikes when so many other people are just completely, everything the league is doing is fantastic. So I look like a hater because of it. No, I try to be fair over here. I was just about to say my favorite rip throughs are Draymond Green rip throughs, where it's, oh God, the defender was obstructing that 21-foot fadeaway that Draymond wanted to shoot.
He's never actually succeeded in getting that call, though. That's the best part. He's never actually he's tried it probably 150 times in his career, and then he always gets mad that he doesn't get the call, but it's like they just don't give it to him.
Well, do you like that? Because I like that. I like a more latitude game. And this is something I would talk about with Kerr. The referee discretion was taken away from them as they tried to make reffing less of an art and more of a science. And they are subject to this scrutiny and the 2-minute report and everything else about you've got to call everything by the letter. It can't be about the spirit. It's got to be about the letter. And last season, when they secretly started allowing for more contact because there was a feeling that it had gotten out of control and scoring went way down, I think a lot of it was a return to ref discretion and just the ability to look at Trae Young and go, yeah, that's a flop. I don't really care what the technical rules are. That's not you trying to make a basketball play. I like that. Do you not like that and feel as though everything's got to be by the letter and a standard versus, hey, this is how back in the day Joey Crawford calls a game and you've just got to learn what everybody's strike zone is?
Yeah, I think there should be more discretion. There probably, back in the day of like an Earl Strom, back in I remember when I used to get Sports Illustrated, the Earl Strom actually wrote or they did an article with him before the 1990-91 season, in which he basically said like, yeah, sometimes I just let it go. If Jordan's out on the fast break, I'm not going to call a travel on him if it's a 10-point game or something. He basically admitted that. And I think that's reasonable. Maybe also noteworthy that was the league's heyday. But there were certainly, when you had stuff like that Game 6 with the Kings and the Lakers in 2002 and of course, the Donaghy scandal, all these other things, there was and all this stuff about how the NBA is rigged, which I hear less of that these days, I would say. I hear less of it's rigged for the big markets.
People feel who would rig it this way. Sorry.
Yeah. So I do think, I don't know how much of that is just that they've actually had an effect with this. I think it's more just that, when the Lakers and the Knicks were terrible for a while, it was hard to really say that it was rigged in favor of the big markets, or that social media made it so obvious that every fan base was complaining about that it just drowned it out. But I think that it evolved to make it quote unquote objective for that reason, because they didn't want to allow themselves to be open to that criticism. And I think it has gone a little bit too far in the other direction. Like they have this transition take foul, which that was something that to the league's credit, they responded to, where guys were just grabbing someone as they ran past and it was taking away awesome fast breaks. But then there's a very specific cue that you have to do now for it to be called. Like, they did a great job of calling it, and then they like clamped down on the enforcement. It's like, well, okay, if you give up on the play, so as long as you like kind of pretend like you're actually making a play on the ball, you can still do it. Like that's so there had to not just be like, yeah, the guy's obviously following him to stop the fast break. And hey, you know what? If there's a few instances where maybe the guy was like kind of making a legitimate play on the ball and it gets called a transition take foul anyway, that's fine. Let's err on that side instead of the side of calling it less, because we want to have more fast breaks, and guys should just know, like, yeah, if you're going to go for a steal in that situation, like, you better get it or at least come close, or you're going to give up a point on a transition take foul. So that's like a perfect example where, yeah, they just refuse to allow discretion to come into it.